Damon Kessler had a badge, a family, and a 5-year secret until one night, in a hospital parking garage, exposed the deadly truth he thought he could hide forever. Officer Damon Kessler lived a life that seemed clean and honorable, the kind of life people trusted without question. As a Boston police officer, he carried an image of discipline, loyalty, and responsibility. Yet beneath that polished surface, he was hiding a truth capable of destroying everything he had built. The secret began 5 years earlier, inside the busy corridors of a Boston hospital. Damon had been assigned to a routine case, something simple and forgettable. But during that visit, he noticed the young Filipina nurse, named Liana Varaz, moving through the hallways with calm focus. Her presence stood out to him, not for anything dramatic, but for a quiet determination that felt different from everyone else around her. Liana had arrived in the city alone, working long shifts to send money back home. She rarely talked about herself, choosing instead to stay in the background. Damon found himself returning to the hospital for reasons that had nothing to do with police work. Their conversations began casually, small exchanges that slowly grew into something deeper. Damon told himself he could manage it, that he could live 2 separate lives without hurting anyone. But with each passing month, the lines blurred until the affair became a permanent part of his routine. To the outside world, Damon was still a devoted husband. He attended neighborhood gatherings, visited friends with his wife Marcy, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, his thoughts belonged to Liana. He started choosing shifts that allowed him to sneak away. He stayed late under the excuse of paperwork. He lied about traffic stops, extra patrols, surprise assignments, anything that kept suspicion away. In the early years, the secrecy made the affair feel thrilling, even addictive. Damon convinced himself he deserved the distraction, the affection, the excitement. What he did not see was how deeply he was sinking into a life built on fragile lies. Liana trusted him more than she should have. Her long shifts made her isolated, and Damon became her only emotional support in a city where she had no family. She never asked for promises, believing whatever time they shared was enough. She did not see how much Damon was depending on her, using her as an escape from the life he no longer felt connected to. Their bond formed quietly but strongly, creating a world that existed behind closed doors and dim hospital hallways. 5 years passed, and their secret grew heavier. The years added pressure Damon never expected. He bought gifts that had to be hidden, spent money he could not explain, and created stories he had to repeat carefully so Marcy wouldn't catch the inconsistencies. Each lie was another brick in the wall he built around himself. Meanwhile, small changes began to show. Damon grew distant at home, forgetting conversations and missing important dates. Marcy noticed how he looked distracted during dinner, how his phone buzzed late at night, how he returned home with a different energy, sometimes too cheerful, sometimes too drained. She watched the man she married slip away, piece by piece, but she couldn't yet understand how deeply he was deceiving her. But at the same time, hospital staff grew accustomed to seeing Damon wandering through the halls, even when he had no official reason to be there. Liana tried to keep their connection hidden, but people noticed the way Damon lingered near her station longer than necessary. Liana began feeling the weight of their secret too, yet neither of them made any move to end it. Their relationship existed in a strange, silent space between comfort and danger. The years of secrecy changed Damon in ways he didn't realize. He became protective in a way that bordered on possessive. He monitored Liana's long shifts and grew tense when she worked with male doctors or new staff. Liana sensed a shift, but convinced herself it was harmless. She believed Damon was simply tired from the pressure of police work. The truth, however, was much darker. Damon had invested so much of himself into this hidden life that he no longer knew how to back out. He felt trapped between two worlds, one built on duty, the other built on forbidden attachment. Each day, the pressure tightened around him, like a rope slowly drawing itself closed. He had no idea that the decisions he made in these early years would eventually spiral into a deadly ending no one could have predicted. Suspicion began quietly, almost invisibly, like a shadow creeping across a room. Marcy Kessler had never been the kind of woman who doubted her husband. She believed in structure, in loyalty, in the quiet routines of married life. For years she trusted Damon, without hesitation, but something in their home had changed. It was in the way he moved, the way he avoided eye contact, the way his mind seemed somewhere else even when he was sitting right in front of her. At first, she ignored it, convincing herself it was just stress from the job. Police work drained people. She had always known that, but as weeks turned into months, the changes became impossible to ignore. Marcy noticed the late-night showers, the sudden interest in his appearance before evening shifts, and the mysterious messages that made him lock his phone instantly. Damon never used to guard his phone. Now it never left his side. His explanations sounded thin, rehearsed, almost mechanical, as if he had said them too many times to too many people. Marcy felt her confidence slipping away. Every moment she tried to reassure herself only brought more doubt. She began replaying small events in her mind, moments she once brushed aside, now sharp with meaning. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Evan Rook found himself observing Damon with increasing curiosity. As the security supervisor, he knew the behavior of people who have had something to hide. Damon visited the hospital far too often, wandering the halls as if searching for something or someone. He arrived at odd hours, sometimes before dawn, sometimes near midnight. Evan watched him through the cameras, noticing how Damon always tried to stay unnoticed. How he moved through areas where he had no official business. The officer's badge gave him access, but his presence raised questions that no badge could answer. Evan began keeping mental notes, then eventually documented the repeated visits. He didn't yet know what the officer was doing, but years in security had taught him that unusual patterns always led to something deeper. He mentioned it once to a coworker, who brushed it off, but Evan felt a tension he couldn't shake. Damon's behavior carried a subtle intensity, a kind of restless energy that suggested he was not there for routine police follow-ups. Liana Veras felt the pressure building around her as well. She was careful, always careful, but after 5 years of secrecy, even the smallest slip could expose everything. A lingering glance in the wrong hallway, a moment of hesitation when Damon appeared unexpectedly, or a rushed exit when she saw familiar faces nearby. Any one of those things could unravel the fragile safety net she had built. She sensed that people were starting to notice patterns. When Nurse hinted at seeing Damon more often than usual, another joked about security being unusually friendly with her. Liana tried to laugh it off, but her heart raced every time someone mentioned Damon's name. Inside her, fear and guilt began to mix. She had started this affair believing it would be temporary, a comfort during lonely nights. But 5 years? It had passed, and everything had become heavier. She felt responsible for the distance she saw growing between Damon and his wife. She felt responsible for the whispers at work. She felt responsible for the tension that followed Damon everywhere. And she knew that secrets as large as theirs always demanded a cost. Damon sensed the growing suspicion, but ignored it. He believed he could control every part of his life with careful planning. He double-checked his phone logs, deleted messages more frequently, and created stronger excuses for leaving the house. But the more he tried to secure his double life, the more unstable it became. His lies began overlapping, forcing him to invent new ones before the old ones unraveled. Marcy started quietly monitoring him, watching his routines the way a detective might study a suspect. She noticed inconsistencies in his that didn't align, receipts that didn't match his claims. Nights he said he was working, but she found the police cruiser parked 2 streets away. She didn't confront him yet. She wasn't ready. She wanted proof, something undeniable, something she could hold in her hands to confirm the growing ache in her chest. Evan, too, grew more determined. He began reviewing camera footage of parking, garages, and back entrances. Damon appeared in far too many angles, too many times, at hours that made no sense. The officer wasn't following a case. He was following a person, and Evan was getting closer to figuring out who the pressure around. Damon tightened each day, invisible but relentless. Suspicion hung in the air between husband and wife, between officer and security supervisor, between nurse and the quiet world she tried to hide behind. The truth was circling them all, slowly closing in, waiting for the moment when everything would finally break open. The foundation of Damon Kessler's double life began to crumble long before he noticed the first cracks. For years he believed he could balance everything: his marriage, his police career, and his secret relationship with Liana Veras. But pressure has a way of exposing the truth, and by the 5th year of the affair, the weight of his choices had become too heavy to hide. Every detail, every lie, every misstep began forming a trail that others could finally see. The breaking point wasn't one moment, but a series of small events tightening around him like a slow, unforgiving trap. Marcy Kessler was the first to feel the shift clearly. She had been ignoring her instincts for months, choosing comfort over confrontation. But one afternoon she discovered something she couldn't push aside. While doing laundry, she found a receipt from a boutique she had never visited. The purchase was expensive, carefully wrapped, and clearly meant for someone else. Damon had never been generous with gifts unless they were practical or predictable. This was neither. Marcy kept the receipt, hiding it in her drawer. She told herself she needed time before deciding what to do with it, but the truth had already taken root in her mind. Then came the bank statements. Damon had always handled the finances, but a small billing error forced Marcy to open their joint account summary. Buried among regular expenses were transfers she couldn't explain, cash withdrawals in areas Damon claimed he never visited, payments to apartments she didn't recognize, and amounts far too large for casual spending. The evidence stacked. itself quietly, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Her heart broke long before she was ready to accept the betrayal. Still, she collected everything, determined to understand the full story before confronting the man she once trusted completely. While Marcy silently gathered proof, hospital security supervisor Evan Rook found himself taking on an unofficial investigation of his own. His instincts had been bothering him for weeks. Damon's presence in the hospital wasn't casual, it was calculated. Evan noticed how the officer always stayed near the same floor, the same corridor, the same parking areas. He studied hours of security footage and found Damon appearing on nights when no cases involving police activity were reported. The pattern was unmistakable. Damon was there for someone, not something. One night, while reviewing footage from the underground parking garage, Evan saw something that confirmed his suspicion. Damon wasn't just visiting the hospital, he was waiting. He sat inside his car for nearly an hour, watching the entrance where staff members finished their shifts. When Liana appeared, Damon stepped out immediately. There was no hesitation, no confusion about who he was there for. Evan didn't know the nature of their relationship yet, but the intensity in the officer's posture told the whole story. This wasn't a casual acquaintance. This was something much deeper and much more dangerous. Meanwhile, Liana Veras found herself caught between fear and guilt. She felt Damon becoming unpredictable, his emotions shifting from affection to intensity in ways that unsettled her. She noticed how he appeared at random times, unannounced and uninvited, as if he was tracking her movements. His questions grew sharper, his behavior more controlling. Liana tried to reassure herself that he was simply stressed, but her instincts warned her that something inside Damon was changing. She thought about ending the relationship several times, yet the idea of hurting him or provoking a reaction made her hesitate. The breaking point came when Liana discovered Damon had followed her home after a late shift. She saw his car parked at the corner of her street, engine off, lights dimmed. It wasn't a coincidence. It was surveillance. It was obsession. That moment shattered whatever comfort she still felt in their relationship. She realized she needed to leave, not gradually, but completely. She wanted a clean break before things escalated beyond repair, but Damon sensed her pulling away. Even without words, he felt the shift in her energy. He noticed the shorter messages, the excuses, the increased distance in her eyes. A deep fear inside him, the fear of losing the one person who made his secret life worth maintaining. The fear twisted into desperation, then into something darker. At the same time, Marcy uncovered enough evidence to confirm the affair, but she stayed silent, watching Damon closely. Evan continued tracking Damon's movements, piecing together details that suggested a situation spiraling out of control. Liana quietly planned her exit, hoping Damon would accept it without causing chaos. None of them knew how unstable Damon had become. None of them knew that a breaking point always leads to an explosion. And the moment that explosion came, it would push all three of their lives toward a tragedy waiting in the shadows. The hospital parking garage stood half-lit under the cold evening sky, its concrete pillars casting long shadows across the empty spaces. Rain earlier in the day had left the floor damp, creating reflections that stretched like dark mirrors. Beneath the fluorescent lights, Liana Veras walked slowly toward her car, exhausted from another long shift. Her shoulders felt heavy, not just from the physical strain of work, but from the emotional weight she had been carrying for weeks. She had made her decision. She would end the affair. She wanted her life back, the life she had before Damon, before the lies, before the fear that now followed her like a second shadow. What she didn't know was that Damon Kessler was already there, hidden in the far corner of the garage, leaning against his car with the engine turned off. He had arrived nearly an hour earlier, too early for anyone to think it was normal. He watched the entrance in silence, gripping the steering wheel before eventually stepping out to wait on foot. His mind was racing, filled with fragments of suspicion, desperation, and anger. He had sensed the distance in Liana's actions over the past few weeks, the shorter replies, the canceled plans, the way she avoided his gaze. Every sign pointed to one thing. She was preparing to leave him. For Damon, losing her wasn't an option. His life had become so entangled with the affair that he no longer knew how to function without it. The relationship had grown into an obsession, feeding a part of him that he had never acknowledged before. He felt entitled to her presence, her attention, her loyalty. The thought of her walking away ignited something dangerous inside him, something he could no longer control. As Liana approached the garage level where she parked, her steps became slower. She felt uneasy, as if someone was watching her. The distant hum of a ventilation fan made the silence heavier. When she finally saw Damon standing near her car, her heart dropped. She wasn't expecting him. She wasn't prepared for this confrontation. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, to head back inside the hospital. but her legs felt frozen in place. Damon stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The garage amplified the sound of his footsteps, each one heavier than the last. Liana took a step back. She didn't need to hear words to understand what he wanted. His presence alone told her everything. He wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to accept her decision. He was there because he had reached the point where losing her felt like losing his entire identity. Tension thickened the air between them. The dim lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that moved with every shift of their body. Liana reached for her badge, thinking she could use it to open the hospital's emergency door. But Damon moved closer, blocking her path. His breathing grew heavier, his posture rigid, and his eyes burning with a mix of fear and fury. Liana's chest tightened as she realized she was trapped physically, emotionally, and tragically. Fear surged through her, pushing her to act, to escape, to survive. She stepped back, her heels slipping slightly on the damp floor. In that instant, Damon's emotions spiraled into something irreversible. His hands shook, his thoughts blurred, and a violent impulse overtook the last bit of reason he had left. The moment felt suspended in time, fragile and deadly. Then, everything shattered. The garage echoed with the sound of a sudden, brutal attack. It happened fast, with a force powered by obsession and panic. Liana collapsed beside her car, her body folding onto the cold concrete. The sound of her fall echoed through the otherwise empty structure, bouncing off the walls like a final cry. Damon stared at her motionless form, his mind unable to process the reality of what he had done. The adrenaline that fueled him moments earlier drained away. Leaving behind shock and terror, he looked around, searching for cameras, for witnesses, for anything that might expose him. The heavy silence of the garage pressed against him, making it clear that there was no going back. He stumbled backward, trembling as he reached his car. His breath came in short, panicked bursts. Within seconds, he started the engine, his tires skidding slightly on the wet pavement as he fled the crime scene with a speed fueled by fear. The garage became still again, except for the distant hum of the ventilation fan. Liana's car sat, quietly, beside her, keys still in her hand, headlights reflecting faintly off the concrete. Her shift had ended, but her life had ended too, right there in the place where she had helped save countless others. A tragedy had unfolded in a space meant for safety, leaving only unanswered questions and a trail of evidence that would soon unravel everything. Damon worked so desperately to conceal. The parking garage, once just another part of the hospital, had become the silent witness to a crime born from obsession, secrecy, and a man pushed beyond the edge of his own lies. The discovery in the hospital parking garage sent a shockwave through Boston before the sun had even risen. A young doctor found Liana Veris's body while returning to retrieve something from his car. Within minutes, the garage erupted with flashing lights, yellow tape, and the tense presence of investigators trying to secure every corner of the scene. The tragedy felt unreal to those who knew her, a hard-working nurse who had spent years caring for others. Now gone in a place she should have been safe, word spread quickly among hospital staff, and whispers of fear and disbelief filled the hallways. No one could understand why she had been targeted. No one, except the person responsible, who was already miles away, trying to erase traces of a life that had finally collapsed on itself. Detectives arrived with urgency, examining every piece of evidence. The damp floor still held partial footprints, and the faint marks of a struggle told them the attack had been sudden and violent. Security Supervisor Evan Rook felt a knot tighten in his stomach the moment he heard about the incident. He didn't need to review footage to suspect who they would find on the tapes. For weeks, he had watched Damon Kessler moving through the hospital, his behavior growing increasingly erratic. Evan walked straight to the security office and pulled the recordings from the previous night, his hands trembling slightly as he scrubbed through hours of footage. Eventually, he found what he was looking for. Damon entered the garage far too early for any legitimate reason, waited near the shadows, and then approached Liana's car just minutes before the cameras stunned to static, as if someone had tampered with the angle or lighting. Evan knew the truth instantly. He forwarded the footage to the lead detective and wrote a detailed statement. His heart pounded as he did so. The officer he had quietly observed was no longer just suspicious. He was now the prime suspect in a murder that shook the entire hospital. Meanwhile, Marcy Kessler woke to the sound of a pounding headache, the kind she had grown used to in recent weeks. Her marriage had been crumbling in silence, and she spent countless nights awake, replaying evidence she had collected. She expected Damon to be home, as he usually worked predictable hours, but his side of the bed was cold. As she moved through the house, she noticed small things that didn't sit right: his duffel bag missing, a drawer left slightly open, and the scent of his cologne lingering as if he had hurried out. Her stomach twisted with a feeling she couldn't name. She turned on the television for background noise but froze when she heard the breaking news headline. A nurse killed in a Boston hospital parking garage. Marcy's body tensed. Something inside her clicked together like a puzzle snapping into place. She listened with growing dread, waiting for a detail that would confirm the fear blooming inside her. Moments later, her phone buzzed a message from a friend asking if she'd seen the news and if she was okay. Marcy didn't respond. She already knew something was terribly wrong. As detectives pieced together the timeline, Damon was spiraling. Every mile he drove away from Boston felt heavier. He had no plan, no destination. His thoughts tangled between panic and regret. He replayed the moment in the garage over and over, but it didn't feel real. He convinced himself he hadn't meant for anything to happen. He hadn't planned to harm her. He just wanted to talk, to stop her from leaving, to make her understand. But none of those excuses mattered. The truth was written in the cold concrete of that garage and in the lifeless silence that followed. Authorities issued an alert for Damon's vehicle by noon. Every patrol unit in the state received his photo and details. The irony was police officer, once trusted to uphold the law, was now being hunted by the very force he served. Damon abandoned his car near an industrial area outside the city, hoping to disappear before anyone recognized him. He moved through back alleys and empty parking lots, desperate to avoid cameras, but it was too late. The investigation was moving faster than he was. Evan's footage, Marcy's Suburban evidence, and Damon's sudden disappearance all pointed to one undeniable truth. The affair had been real. The obsession had grown dangerous. The murder was no accident. It was the violent end of a secret double life. By evening, police located Damon, hiding behind an abandoned warehouse. He didn't run when they approached. The weight of his decisions had already crushed whatever fight he had left. He surrendered quietly, staring at the ground as officers cuffed his hands, a broken man stripped of the lies he once believed. Back at the hospital, a memorial formed for Liana, flowers, candles, handwritten notes from patients and co-workers who remembered her kindness. Her life had been simple and hard-working. She had asked for nothing more than safety and peace in a new city. Instead, she became the victim of a man who couldn't control the consequences of his own choices. As the case closed, Boston mourned, a nurse taken too soon, and the city confronted the painful truth that danger sometimes comes not from strangers, but from the people trusted the most.